I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It may be the most loved verse in the Bible and the most misunderstood. You have heard this one. Maybe you have said it yourself. It lives on coffee mugs and gym walls. Athletes point to the sky and quote it. Students whisper it before an exam. It has become the verse we reach for when we want to win. But let me ask you something honest. What happens when you say those words and nothing changes? You prayed, and the answer was no. The promotion never came. The illness never healed. The marriage kept breaking. And somewhere in the quiet, a painful thought creeps in. Maybe God did not show up. Maybe my faith was just too small. If that thought has ever visited you, stay with me, because here is what almost no one tells you. When Paul wrote, "I can do all things," he was not promising you a bigger life. In the original Greek, this sentence does not say what the mug says. There is a single word buried inside it, a word borrowed from the ancient world. And once you see it, you will understand this verse on a far deeper level. And that is the first thing I want to show you today. The real meaning is not smaller than the popular one. It is bigger. It just points in a direction almost no one expects. But I want to promise you something more. This is not going to be a lesson you file away and forget. Because the true meaning of "I can do all things" is not something you quote. It is something you can actually live on your hardest day, when your circumstances refuse to move. This is where the verse goes beyond motivation and becomes something you can carry into real life. So here is where we are going. First, we will read the words Paul wrote right before this famous line, the words the world skips. Then we will open the Greek and decode what "all things" really means. We will uncover the secret Paul said he had to learn. And finally, we will bring it home into your waiting room and your sleepless nights. Let us begin where Paul began, not in victory, in chains. So let us start with the first thing, and it is the part almost everyone skips. Here is the strange truth. To understand the most quoted verse in the letter, you have to read the sentence that comes right before it, because a verse is like a single frame pulled out of a movie. If you only see that one frame, you can make it mean almost anything you want. But when you press play and you watch what comes before, the whole meaning snaps into focus. So press play with me. Listen to what Paul says just before the famous line. In Philippians 4, verses 11 and 12, he writes, "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am." Now stop right there. Content, not victorious, not unstoppable, not living his best life. Content. That is the word sitting right next to "I can do all things," and it changes the temperature of the whole room. And here is the part that should stop you in your tracks. Where is Paul when he writes this? He is not on a stage. He is not celebrating a win. He is sitting in a Roman prison, chained to a guard, not knowing if he will live or die. And from that cell, this is the man who says, "I have learned to be content." Think about that for a second. Most of us can barely stay content when the internet is slow, or the line at the store is too long, or someone takes the parking spot we wanted. Paul is in chains, and he is at peace. So clearly he knows something we do not. And he tells us exactly what it is. He keeps going. He says, "I know how to get along with little, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need." Do you hear the contrast in those words? Plenty and scarcity, abundance and need. Seasons when Paul had more than enough, and seasons when he had very little. He had experienced life at its highest points and walked through its lowest valleys. Yet through every changing circumstance, he discovered something within him that remained steady. And this is where it gets personal, for you and me. Because most of us are chasing one side of that list. We think, if I could just get to abundance, if I could just get to the full table, then I would finally have peace. But Paul flips it. He says peace is not waiting for you at the top of the mountain. It is something you can carry with you, in the valley and on the peak, in plenty and in want. Think of the person who finally gets the promotion, the bigger house, everything they always wanted, and then lies awake at night, still empty, still restless. Now think of someone with almost nothing, who somehow radiates a peace you cannot explain. Paul is telling us why. So notice what has already happened. We have not even reached verse 13 yet, and the popular meaning is already falling apart. This was never a verse about getting more. It was written by a man who had learned to need less and to stand firm no matter which way life turned. Which raises the real question. What exactly did Paul learn? What is this secret that lets a prisoner in chains carry more peace than a free man who has everything? He gives us the answer in the very next breath, in verse 13. But to hear what he actually said, we cannot read it in English. We have to open the original Greek, because the words he chose are far stronger and far stranger than the version on the coffee mug. And that is where we are going next. So here we are, verse 13, the famous line. And this is our second stop, the one the whole video turns on. In your English Bible it reads, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. 10 simple words. But Paul did not write in English. He wrote in Greek. And in Greek, this sentence is doing something the translation cannot fully carry. So let us slow down and open it up, one phrase at a time. Start with that bold little phrase, all things. In Greek it is one word, panta. And yes, on its own, panta can mean all things, everything, without limit. This is where the popular reading grabs the wheel. It hears panta, and it fills in the blank with whatever we want, all things. My dream job, my perfect body, my championship, my comeback. But words do not live alone, they live in sentences. And a moment ago, we read the sentence around this one. Remember what Paul was just talking about? Being full and being hungry, having plenty and having need, getting along with little and living in abundance. So, when he says, all things, he is not pointing at a wish list, he is pointing back at that. He means all of these circumstances, the good days and the brutal ones, the full table and the empty plate. I can do, I can face, I can walk through all of it. Do you feel the meaning shift under your feet? All things was never a blank check for your ambitions. It is a promise for your circumstances, but that is only half the sentence, because the real power is not in what Paul can do, it is in how, and that brings us to the strongest word in the verse, the word strengthens. In Greek, it is endunamounti. Now say it slowly with me, because there is a secret hiding inside it. En-du-na-moun-ti. Do you hear that first sound? En. It means in or within. This is the whole thing. Paul is not saying Christ stands at a distance and cheers him on. He is not saying Christ hands him a burst of energy from far away, like a coach on the sideline. He is saying Christ pours his strength into him from the inside out. The power does not come to Paul. It rises up within him. It is not motivation shouted from outside. It is a person living within. And here is why that matters so much. Motivation always runs out. You have felt it. You watch the video, you feel the fire, you are ready to conquer the world. And by Thursday, the feeling is gone, and you are right back where you started. Motivation is fuel poured into a tank, and tanks run dry. But what Paul describes is not fuel in a tank. It is a spring inside a well. It does not depend on your mood or your energy or how strong you feel that morning. It is a strength that is not even yours. So let us put the two pieces back together and read it the way Paul actually wrote it. Not, I can achieve anything I set my mind to, but something closer to this. I have the strength to face any and every circumstance, because the strength is not mine. Christ is pouring his own power into me from the inside. Read it that way, and everything changes. This is not a verse for the winners. It is a verse for the weary. It is not for the moment you feel unstoppable. It is for the moment you feel like you cannot take one more step, and somehow you take it anyway. That is not you being strong. That is the strength within you that has another name. And now you can see why Paul could write these words in a prison cell and mean every syllable. He was not talking about a strength that removes the chains. He was talking about a strength that meets him inside them. But there is still one word left in this passage that we have not touched. Back in verse 12, Paul said he had learned the secret, and the Greek word he chose there is one of the strangest and most beautiful in the whole letter. because it does not come from the world of the church at all. It comes from somewhere no one expects. So let us open that word together. So this is our third stop, and it is the one I have been waiting to show you. Go back with me one more time to verse 12. Paul says, I have learned the secret. Now, in English, learned the secret sounds gentle, almost casual, like he picked up a helpful tip along the way. But the Greek word underneath is anything but casual. The word is memumai, and it does not come from the marketplace, or the school, or even the temple in Jerusalem. It comes from a world Paul's readers knew very well, and one we have almost completely forgotten. Memumai comes from the root mueo, and in the ancient world, this was the special word for being initiated into the mystery religions. Let me explain what that means, because it is beautiful. Back then, there were secret societies with sacred rituals. To become a member, you could not just read a book about it. You could not watch from the outside. You had to be brought in, step by step, through a long and often painful process, until at last you were let in on the secret that only the initiated could know. That is the word Paul reaches for. He is saying, this contentment, this steadiness in plenty and in hunger, is not a fact I read somewhere. It is not a verse I memorized. It is a secret I was initiated into. I was brought into it the hard way, through the hunger, through the prison, through the nights I did not know if I would survive. And that changes everything about how we hear this. Because if you have ever felt like other people got some peace that you were never handed, listen closely. Paul is telling you it was never handed to him either. He was walked into it. And the doorway, every single time, was not comfort. It was hardship. Sit with that for a moment, because it is the opposite of everything we are sold. We are told the secret to peace is more. More money, more security, more control, and then finally you will rest. Paul says no. The secret was learned in the exact places we spend our whole lives trying to avoid. The empty plate taught him. The prison cell taught him. His weakness was not the obstacle to the secret. It was the classroom. The very thing you have been begging God to remove may be the very place He is teaching you to stand. And here is the part that pulls this whole thing together. What was the secret? What was actually waiting at the end of that long initiation? Not a technique, not a mindset, not 5 steps to a calmer life. It was a person. It was Christ Himself. Look at how the sentence lands. I have learned the secret, verse 12, and then verse 13, through Christ who strengthens me. The secret and the strength have the same name. The mystery Paul was initiated into was not a what, it was a who. And once you see that, you start to notice it everywhere in Scripture. Think of Joseph, sold by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, then a prison, and somehow God was with him in all of it. Think of David, hiding in caves, writing songs of trust while his enemies hunted him. Think of Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, on his knees, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Over and over, the same pattern. The strength shows up inside the suffering, not instead of it. So the secret is not that God will keep you out of the hard place. The secret is who meets you when you are in it. But I know what some of you are thinking right now. That sounds beautiful on a screen. But you are living something real. The diagnosis has not changed. The person is still gone. The prayer you have prayed 1,000 times still seems to hit the ceiling. So what does any of this actually mean when your hard place will not end? That is the most important question of all. So let us go there now. So this brings us to our 4th stop, and this is the one that matters most, because everything we have uncovered so far means nothing if it cannot stand in your worst moment. Years after Paul wrote to the Philippians, he was still wrestling with something he called a thorn in the flesh. We do not know exactly what it was, a sickness, a person, a pain that would not leave. But we know what he did about it. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul says he begged God 3 times to take it away. 3 times. Not a casual prayer, a desperate one, the kind you pray on the floor. And what did God say? Not yes. Listen to the answer. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Sit with how strange that is. Paul asked for the thorn to be removed, and God said no. But in the same breath, God said, My power is made perfect. It reaches its full strength, precisely in your weakness, not after the weakness is gone, inside it. The very thing Paul wanted removed became the very place God's strength showed up the most. Now let me bring this out of the ancient world and into a living room you might recognize. Imagine a mother sitting beside a grown son who is battling an illness of the mind, a sickness that has taken his job, his home, his stability. She has prayed for years. She has prayed the bold prayers, the desperate prayers, the angry prayers, and still morning comes, and the situation is the same. If I can do all things means God will fix it, then this verse has already failed her 1,000 times over. But that is not what it means, and she knows it, because somehow, in the middle of a story that has not turned around, she is still standing. She still gets up. She still loves him. She still finds on the hardest mornings a peace she cannot explain and did not manufacture. That is not denial. That is not her pretending it does not hurt. That is endunamounti. That is the strength being poured in from the inside, meeting her exactly where the pain is. This is what it means to go beyond motivation. Motivation says you can fix this if you try hard enough, but what happens when you cannot fix it? What happens when you have already given it everything, and it still will not move? Motivation has nothing left to say. It walks out of the room, but the strength Paul is talking about walks in at that exact moment, sits down beside you, and stays. And here I want to be careful and honest with you, because this matters. This verse was Paul describing his own life. It is his testimony, not a magic formula, and there is a real difference. A formula says, do this and you will get that. But a testimony says, come and see what I found to be true. Paul is not handing you a guarantee that your circumstances will change. He is inviting you into something he discovered to be real when his own did not. So, let me say the thing you might need to hear most. If you have prayed and the answer has been no, or not yet, or silence, that is not proof that your faith is broken. Paul prayed 3 times and got a no, and he was one of the most faithful believers who ever lived. A no from God is not the absence of his power. Sometimes it is the doorway to it. Because think about what actually gets revealed in the hard place. When life is easy, you never find out whether your peace was real or just circumstantial. Anyone can feel content on a good day, but the person who can stand in the collapse, who can lose the thing and still not lose their center, that person has found something the comfortable never will. Your weakness is not disqualifying you. It is the very stage on which the strength of Christ becomes visible to you and to everyone watching your life. So no, this verse does not promise you an easy road. It promises you company on the hard one. It does not always change your circumstances. It changes who you are inside them. And if that is true, if his power really is made perfect in our weakness rather than after it, then there is one question left, a practical one. Because it is one thing to believe this, it is another thing to actually live it tomorrow morning when the alarm goes off and the hard thing is still there. So how do we actually do that? That is where we go last. So here we are at our 5th and final stop before we bring it all home. And this is the one you can actually use tomorrow. Because there is a small word in Paul's testimony that we keep walking past, and it holds the key to everything practical. Paul did not say, I am content. He said, I have learned to be content. Learned. That one word should lift a weight off your shoulders right now, because it means contentment is not a personality type some lucky people are born with. It is not a gift that fell on Paul and skipped you. It is a skill, and a skill can be learned, which means wherever you are today, you are not too far behind to start. The apostle says it plainly in another letter. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, he writes, Godliness with contentment is great gain, not godliness with success, not godliness with a bigger house, godliness with contentment. That combination, he says, is the real wealth. So the question becomes simple and urgent. How do we learn it? Let me give you 3 honest places to begin. The first is this. Learn to trace your strength back to its source, every single day. Remember the Greek. The strength is poured in from the inside, from Christ living in you. But a spring you never visit might as well be dry. This is why Paul's life was soaked in prayer and scripture, not as a religious duty, but as the daily act of going back to the well. So, start small. 5 honest minutes in the morning, 1 verse, 1 real prayer. You are not performing for God. You are plugging into the only power that does not run out. The second place is harder and more freeing. Learn to separate your needs from your wants. Remember, Paul learned contentment in hunger and in plenty. That means he had to get honest about the difference between what he truly needed and what he simply craved. So much of our restlessness is not real need. It is a want that has disguised itself as a need. And here is a practice you can start today. When the ache for more rises up, and it will, pause and ask one question. Do I actually need this, or have I just been told that I do? That single question, asked honestly, has loosened more chains than most people realize. And the third is the deepest. Learn to let your weakness drive you toward God, instead of away from Him. This is the great turn. Most of us, when we feel weak, we hide, we pull back, we assume God wants us at our strongest, but everything we have seen says the opposite. Weakness is not the place God leaves you, it is the place He meets you. So the next time you feel like you are falling apart, do not wait until you have it together to come back to Him. Come as you are. That is the whole point. Now let me speak to something honestly, because I know it is on some of your hearts. Some of you have been taught to declare victory, to speak strength over your situation, to say it out loud until it comes true. And there is something real in that. Faith does speak, but hear the difference. Biblical contentment is not you working up enough willpower to force an outcome, and it is not passive surrender either, just going numb and giving up. It is something better than both. It is trusting that the one who holds you is good, and staying faithful right in the middle, whether the answer is yes, or no, or wait. That is not weakness pretending to be strong. That is strength that has stopped depending on your circumstances. So picture it. The morning comes. The hard thing is still there, but now you know what to do. You go back to the well. You tell the truth about what you actually need. And you let your weakness carry you toward God instead of away. Not once, in a burst of motivation, but daily, quietly, until one day you look back and realize you too have learned the secret. And that brings us all the way back to where we started. To a coffee mug, a gym wall, and a verse the whole world thinks it understands. So let us go back there now and finish this the right way. So let us go back to that coffee mug one last time. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When we started, it looked like a promise that you could achieve anything you set your heart on. A blank check for your dreams. But look at it now. Look at how much bigger it has become. We opened the Greek and we found 2 truths hiding in plain sight. That all things was never your wish list. It was your circumstances, every high and every low. And that strengthens me was never a coach shouting from the sidelines. It was Christ Himself pouring His own power into you from the inside. Then we found the secret Paul was initiated into, the hard way, through hunger and through chains. And the secret turned out to be not a technique, but a person. So here is the answer to the question we asked at the very beginning. What does I can do all things actually mean? It does not mean you will win every battle. It means you will not face a single one alone. It does not promise a life without weakness. It promises a strength made perfect inside your weakness. This verse was never meant to make you unstoppable. It was meant to make you unbreakable. And that, my friend, is so much better than motivation. Motivation fades by Thursday. This holds you at 3 in the morning. So the next time life presses in and you whisper these words, you will not be reaching for a lucky charm. You will be remembering a person who is already with you, in the room, in the waiting, in the weakness. Not to remove every hard thing, but to walk you through all things. Now, before you go, I have 3 small invitations, offered as a friend, not a favor. If this helped you, tap like. If you want to go deeper, subscribe. And in the comments, tell me the room you are standing in. And now, as you go, receive this blessing. May the God of all grace strengthen you from the inside out. May you find in your hardest place that His grace really is sufficient for you. May you learn, like Paul, the secret of being content in every circumstance, and may you come to know, deeper than words, the one who gives you strength for all things. You are not alone. You never were. Go in his peace, and I will see you in the next one.